Hello all, and welcome to the Rails board meeting. This is Friday, March 24th, 2023. I'm Alex Vancina, president of the Rails board, and I call this meeting to order at 1 p.m. Stacy, would you please call roll?
Yes. Monica Caldecott.
Here.
Rosie Camargo. Alice Creason.
Here.
Robin Hellenthal. Robin Hellenthal.
Oh, there you go.
Here. I didn't realize I was.
Diane Hollister. Renee Leva.
Here.
Jennifer McIntosh.
Here.
Julie Milivic. Here. Becky Spratford.
Here.
Tom Stagg.
Here.
Beth Teppin.
Here.
Alex Vancina.
Here.
Vanessa Villarreal.
Here.
And Karen Votek. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Stacy. On to recognition of guests and announcements. Since we have an in-person quorum, we do not need to do a roll call for every vote. We will handle guests and public comments at the same time. Let's start with guests here in Burr Ridge. Monica?
Monica Harris, Rails.
Sharon Swanson, Rails.
Stacy Palmisano. Rails.
Joe Philippek, Rails.
Cam Slaughter. Rails. Mary Kay Murray. Rails.
Vinia Krempo, Rails.
Rails.
Laura Nemeth, Rails.
Are there any public comments in Burr Ridge? If not, now on to Rails in East Peoria.
James Campbell,
Any
Rails.
guests?
Robert
Any
Morgan,
public comment?
Rails.
Nope.
Thank you. Next, State Library.
Greg McCormick.
Pat Berg.
Any public comments at the State Library?
No.
Thank you both. Let's see. Stacy, would you please read the names of guests on Zoom?
We have Kim Perry as a guest on Zoom. She's a Rails employee.
Are there any comments on Zoom?
Oh, I'm sorry, there's also, there's a few more. Hold on. There's Mary Witt, Rails, Layla Heath, Rails, Jeanette Daruki, Rails, Ryan Hebel, Rails, Mark Hatch, Rails, and Rosie has logged on. And Eric Bain is also Rails.
And Brian Smith.
And Brian Smith. Thank you. Brian.
Thank you. Any public comments from Zoom participants? If not, did we receive any comments by email?
There are no comments via email.
Thank you. Let's see. Next, we have the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to move any items to the regular agenda for further discussion?
I just have a correction to the minutes from last month. Monica Caldecott and our names are on there twice, both in person at Burr Ridge and on Zoom. And I think I was in person, and I think Monica, were you on Zoom last month?
Yes, I was on Zoom last month.
Thank you, Alice.
Thanks, Alice.
Any other corrections to the minutes or items to be moved to the regular agenda? Not, I may have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move.
Vanessa?
Yep. And I'll second.
Julie, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next is Sharon Swanson with the financial report.
Good morning, everyone. You will find in your packet the financial reports for February 2023. The February 28th general fund cash and investment balance of 24.2 million would fund approximately 23.3 months of budgeted operations. General fund revenues through February of 13.1 million were approximately $2.4 million above budget. And this was mostly due to the receipt of the sixth and final live and learn payment from our APC grant that was received February 7th. And the only remaining portion of our APC grant is now the federal portion, the LSTA portion, and that totals $1,936,144. We're still on track to receive our entire fiscal year's grant funds by May, and this is the third year in a row that that's happened. Prior to this, prior to fiscal year 21, grant funds were received much more slowly. Investment income was $483,220 through February, which is $431,380 above the budgeted amount due to the continued Federal Reserve rate increases. They increased the rates once again by 25 basis points this week on Wednesday. And this increase was the ninth increase since this last March. But the increases are becoming and staying much less aggressive than increases earlier this year. And with the recent bank failures and the pressures that that's putting on the economy, the Fed is now thinking that they're going to slow down the rate increases, potentially one more before the end of the calendar year, 25 basis points maybe at this point, and then maybe start decreasing things slowly. So the general fund expenditures through February were 9.3 million, which were approximately $654,000 below budget. And this was mostly due to lower contractual services expenditures from less than budgeted increase yet again in our negotiated delivery service, outsourcing delivery service contractor contract. And also a shift of cataloging grant expenditures that we award to members that want to join an LSAP to later in the fiscal year. The process was retooled. We do expect to award the majority of the $80,000 that was budgeted for these before the end of the fiscal year. And this variance was also due to not having yet incurred expenses for the Verso Consortium, which is basically an ILS platform that we had planned to provide to non-automated and under-automated libraries, currently a part of the Find More Illinois group. And it's also due to not having yet had the opportunity to award any Find More Illinois joining incentives, which were budgeted. Personnel was also a major category that's currently under budget. And again, primarily due to the delayed hiring for the three newly created positions that were open for part of the year, as well as the current opening for the associate director's position. Travel is currently under budget, but we're expecting as reimbursements are processed for conferences that are occurring, that's going to come much closer to the budgeted amount. And vehicle expenditures as a whole are below budget because we budgeted at a $4.25 rate for fuel per gallon, which thankfully has fallen since we put the budget together. But this is partially offset by increased repairs and maintenance costs for our vehicles, both due to the aging of our fleet and our recent catalytic converter theft. The first expense of which is reflected in the check register and in these reports for the replacement of 3 of those catalytic converters that were stolen. And I also wanted to point out some activity in our capital projects fund. So in February, we purchased a warehouse van for our East Peoria location. And this is just the equipment purchase. The installation charges will appear in March's reports. So, and at this point, given the recent bank failures that we all saw hit the news, we thought it would be an ideal time to share a little information about Rails's depositories and our safety and collateralization of Rails's accounts. So as we mentioned, both of the banks that failed were not adequately capitalized, and they operated in very specialized markets. One in the startup technology industry, the other one invested heavily and service clients that were in the cryptocurrency market, which is a completely opposite business model from our banks that we use. Thank God.
Understatement of the year.
So we mostly have our funds with small community banks, as well as public fund investment pools, which are operated in compliance with the Illinois Public Funds Investment Act. Completely different client base. Thank God. We were slightly touched in a third-party way by the failure of the SVB Bank, the Silicon Valley Bank, because our accounting software actually used that bank as their primary bank. So we received a notification this last week or so saying that, oh, if we're making ACH payments, we need to change the bank information. So third party didn't affect us in any way, but just thought I'd mention. So most of our liquid funds are held in an account with Hinsdale Bank and Trust, which is under the network of the Wintrust banks in general. Wintrust is both well capitalized and positioned with a large amount of resources to draw upon if needed. Rails has $3.5 million of FDIC coverage. And the way Wintrust works, they have a max save program, so they spread out your deposit amongst their 14 eligible banks within their network at $250,000 increments. So we have roughly $3.5 million of FDIC coverage, and then all of our funds that we have with them that are above that balance are backed with mortgage-backed securities that are held by a third party in Rails's name, which is in compliance yet again with the Illinois Public Funds Investment Act, since they have a large library municipality client base. So they're very, very familiar with complying. So the remainder of Rails's liquid funds are held in a money market account with Illinois funds, as well as a small amount, very small amount with PMA in their local government investment pool. So the Illinois funds is backed by US Treasury obligations and is collateralized at 102% in compliance yet again with the Illinois Public Funds Investment Act. The PMA account is operated as a part of the IntraFi Network Deposit Program. So working almost the same way that Wintrust does to spread the balances of $250 increments between banks that are within their network to stay under the FDIC insurance limits so that they can offer additional coverage. And Rails also has a series of investments, mostly with PMA, so Treasury notes, safest type of investment out there, compliant with the Illinois Public Funds Investment Act, and also CDs, which are all under the FDIC insurance limits and spread between banks within that IntraFi network. And also, we do have a small number of Treasury bonds that were willed to us by the Alliance Library System, a former staff member of the Alliance Library System when she passed away. Those are double locked in a room with extremely limited access and checked every year by our auditor that they're still in there and still secured. They have matured. We aren't losing any money, but an inquiry about a year and a half ago with the Treasury Department, they came back with a response, and we're going to have to jump through a few hoops to try to redeem those. That may involve our lawyer. So at this point, we're just sitting back, and that's on the back burner since we're not really losing any money at this point on those, but it's just $24,000. And that is basically it for my report. Does anyone have any questions? I'm sorry, I went on for so long.
It's a great time to cover this material,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right, if there are no questions, then we'll move on to reports. I have no report this month, so next we have the committee report. We'll discuss the board election process and the nominating committee later in the agenda. Are there any other additions to the reports that were included in the agenda packet?
I have another small correction to the reports in the agenda packet because the nominating committee chair was listed as Jennifer McIntosh. And it should be Alice Creason.
Yes,
Oops.
thank you.
Not me.
Oh, God. Thank you, Alice. I'm sorry about that.
All right.
It actually matters greatly, so that's good.
Next, we have the Rails monthly report. Monica?
Thank you, Alex. Before we get into the content that is in the report, I just wanted to offer a couple of things that have come up in the last week just to share with you in addition. So first of all, you should have all received a statement of economic interest. If you have not received one of those, they all come out in March. Please get in contact with Emily. We will make sure that you do receive your statement of economic interest. If you have received it, just an encouragement to please fill that out and provide a copy to Emily when it's done. We just have to have all of those on file by May, I believe. We also wanted to just keep in mind some of the schedule that this board has previously operated on and just check with you and get it in mind, but typically the board does do an evaluation of the director in April. I am very new to my position, so our thought was that we would provide a draft sample of the goals for the executive director to the board in April for discussion, and then could have additional discussion if you would like beyond that around how to move forward with the evaluation process in this juncture, but just wanted to share that with you as well as an upcoming piece of information. I did want to take the opportunity to introduce you to a couple of new folks that are in the room today. So sitting over here on this wall is Laura Namath. Laura is new to our finance department. We're very happy to have her here. And then on this call, we've got Rania, and Rania is new to our administrative department. We're very happy to have both of them here in the organization. You'll be seeing both of them, I'm sure, frequently as we move through. So we wanted the chance to get to say anything you all want to say.
Very excited to be here, but and very new, so.
Welcome.
Welcome.
It's wonderful. So thank you both for being here today, and thank you all for the introduction. We've been doing a lot this month. So in an effort to get to make sure that the membership knows the new executive director, we've done a series of meet and greets as well as the member update. If you have any interest in watching the member update in particular, there is a video of that available on the Rails YouTube page. There were about 207 people that were registered for that, which is a lot for us. About 142 people actually attended. It was really well attended. In addition to just a short presentation by myself to share a little bit about my background and goals, we also talked about questions for the membership that we asked for some feedback on, including what they like best about Rails. If they could add a Rails program or service, what would it be, and how can Rails communicate with them more effectively? So we got a lot of great feedback via that online session. We did take and compile all of that feedback and then discuss it and share it with our executive team. We're also continuing to do that with any of the in-person meet and greets that we have. So we've had 2 so far. The first one we actually did in Bourbonnais. We had 17 people for that event. Renee Leva actually came to the event, which we really appreciate. And it was a really good just kind of conversation. I think one of the opportunities that these in-person meet and greets afford us is the chance to just have a back and forth and talk more about what people are thinking about. We've also found that there are more mid-level staff that are coming to these than just directors that we sometimes see even in our online meet and greet. So that was very interesting as well. And all of the feedback that we are getting, we are again sharing. The other one we did was here in Burr Ridge. Becky Stratford came to that one. Thank you, Becky. And additionally, it was a lot of conversation. As we have those, I'll be sharing some of the feedback that we receive as a compilation in these reports. And so you can see some of the concerns or interests that are sort of repeated from meeting to meeting. And a lot of them are really in alignment with the feedback that we received in the strategic plan as well, which I think is interesting, but also shows us that we are on the right track when it comes to the directions that we are moving. We also wanted to share a little bit about those legislative meetups that we shared at the last meeting that were happening through the Illinois Library Association. Both meetings have already occurred, although there is a recording that you can view of the Ready, Set, Advocate program that's available through ILA. All Rails board members are encouraged to participate in step 3 as provided by ILA, which is to meet with your local legislator and make sure that they're aware of the priorities of the Illinois Library Association and then report back to ILA. So if you have an opportunity, we definitely encourage our Rails board members to take part in that process as they move forward with their own legislative agenda. Similarly, we wanted to share a little bit about what's going on with some of those legislative priorities. And so we did have some of those in here, including that of Illinois House Bill 2789, which I know many of you have heard a lot about. Just so you're aware, over 900 individual witness statements were received, which is a lot. And so thank you for the support of those board members and Rails members that continue to support this House bill, which requires public and school libraries to adopt policies based on censorship and book banning to receive grant funding from the Illinois State Library. That has now moved from the House and been passed by the House as of Wednesday, and it will now move to the Senate. Senator Laura Murphy is going to lead that legislation in the Senate, and there is an expectation that that will likely move forward following that. So that's in a very good position. Similarly, brought forward by the Secretary's Office is Illinois Senate Bill 2419, which is one that is specifically about ebooks and bless you, and allowing the state librarian to negotiate with publishers of ebooks and e-audiobooks on behalf of libraries in search of reasonable terms. That went through committee unanimously and was crafted to avoid legal issues that are holding up the Maryland bill. So we will continue to watch that very closely. It's scheduled for a third reading, I believe, or it's been through the third reading. So Rails is going to continue to share information.
Although I
as
don't know
that
if you
becomes
saw, like,
available.
the publishers, the American Publisher Association is going hard against it because they've commented that other states are trying to do this and have really upsetting. Like, I've stopped the board writers from signing on because some of our other writing organizations are signing on and it's not good. Like, they're like fixated on bills like ours that are purposely trying to not do the things that got the Maryland bill struck down.
Yes, and thank you for
And
mentioning.
it's so they're like, we love libraries, but they're taking away our chance to make money. And it's just,
Yeah,
the language is really inflammatory and a lot of authors are falling for it.
I have not seen as much from the publisher's end, although I'll certainly look for that. I have seen some of the legislation that is in other states that was specifically crafted to avoid some of the legal pitfalls that the Maryland
And they're mentioning
bill
that in their
mentioned.
marketing, like they're now finding ways to do different legislation.
Yes, and specifically Connecticut and Hawaii were mentioned in the most recent Readers First publishing piece, which really shared the way that some of those states are looking at moving that forward. So we will see what happens in Illinois, but I'm very encouraged by the
Oh, yeah.
opportunity to compare it specifically with the way that publishers approach print runs and trying to find ways to see what's possible there. So we will continue to watch that and let you know what we see. I also had the opportunity to attend the March ISLAC meeting. I know Greg is here with us today, and we really appreciated the opportunity to be in at the State Library and be part of that conversation. Most of the discussion was around those two House bills, and in addition to a third bill, which actually covers the budget for the Secretary. That's House Bill 4016. That is expected to be scheduled for next week. It does include the budget and includes specific detail on an additional $5 million in the technology grants area, which is intended to be, towards the purchase of databases. So please watch this very closely. I know that there's a lot that will still have to be figured out in administrative rules for all of these pieces if they are to move forward and how that would happen. But we are very excited and encouraged by these really important bills that are moving forward and getting to see some of the support that's happening in the state on behalf of this. So just wanted to make sure that we mentioned that, and we're very glad to get more information about it yesterday from the Illinois State Library as well. In addition, let me just see what else we wanted to be able to share: the emergency purchase investigation. So we have been sharing a lot of the trouble that we've been having around getting vehicles for the libraries. We even mentioned this yesterday at ISLAC because we typically would budget about $25,000 for a delivery van, for example, and those same delivery vans are now running about $55,000 in order to be able to purchase. But the problem is not even just the price, it's the availability. It's very difficult to get a hold of these vehicles, and when you do, someone else wants them very quickly. It's also difficult to get them via bid process because one, they have more vehicles than they want to even go through the bid process because they have so many more people wanting to purchase them. But there is also difficulty around trying to just make sure that there's enough availability of getting things at all. So Heartland actually recently went through a very interesting emergency purchase process with their board in February. So we've been looking at that process to see if we could potentially use the same thing that would allot for amount of money that as an emergency purchase would allow us to purchase vehicles, both new and used, as we're able to find them under a certain amount approved by the board. So we're currently working on a proposal that if we're able to move it through legal and have that approved, that we would potentially bring to the board in April. So I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that. Vehicles are a really important concern. We're spending a lot on repairs. We've had vehicles break down, in places and to kind of slow down and stop deliveries. So it is is really, really important that we continue to find ways to address this. And hopefully a state contract will also be issued to somebody with vehicles, which is the easiest way for us to be able to purchase those. But in the interim, we just think we have to find additional solutions to try to move that forward. So we wanted to share that with you as well. We did share some information about our facilities, some of which is about our Coal Valley facility that I know we'll all be seeing for those of you who are able to come in person to visit next month, as well as our new Rails website, which Brian will give you great detail on a little bit later. I did want to especially call out Rails at the Illinois Youth Services Institute conference in Bloomington Normal. We had a great conference there, and I wanted to thank especially Rails board member Rosie Camargo, who worked that booth and did a really great job interacting with the folks who are using. So I wanted to thank Rosie for that especially. And we also wanted to call your attention to the ILA Reporter this month. If you're looking at the ILA Reporter, we have an article from our own Dan Bostrom on specialized libraries. And I want to thank Becky Spratford for suggesting that we also submit an article about the new Rails Executive Director, which also appeared in the ILA's Reporter. So you're seeing lots of Rails in the ILA Reporter this month. So take a look if you have access to that. And finally, wanted to call your attention. I know there was a lot of interest around the decennial committees on Local Government Efficiency Act. A lot of our libraries looking for more guidance on how they can comply with that act. We've been working for a long period of time with Julie Tappendorf from Ansel Glink as they've worked to put together a memo that would work for their clients. And especially thank Joe Philippek for his work on that. So the memo has now been shared. It is available on the Rails website. And we also have an upcoming webinar that's coming up on April 14th at 11 a.m. We already have 150 people registered for that webinar. So definitely want to make sure that people are aware and can attend that, because we know a lot of members really wanted to see more around that. That is my report. Can I answer any questions or any comments on anything that was shared today?
I have a question about the social media report that's included in the packet. Lots of great information. I love how it's broken down. Thank you for all of that. More of just like a thought that occurs to me, but I'm looking at this is interesting on the audience page. Interesting, the top town in all of these categories is Chicago proper. I mean, and I thought that was just kind of interesting since that's not really directly our service area for Rails. So I was wondering if anybody has contemplated that at all and what the implications of that are.
And I'll see, I think Mary Witt is on the call. So Mary, if you have any insight that you'd like to offer that, some of it, I think, and I'm not sure exactly how these analytics work when it comes to these social media, but some of it is just probably purely the amount of people that live in Chicago compared to some of these areas and those that are looking. We do, of course, service lots of libraries that are within the city of Chicago as well. But yes, it is interesting that that's how it broke down.
Right.
Mary, would you have anything to add about those statistics that came through and the towns and cities for each social media platform?
I don't, but I will find out from Ola Gronsky and see if she has anything. I would have said exactly what you said, Monica, but I will find out if there is any other different information from Ola. She's the person who does all our social media.
Ola's been doing a really terrific job with the Rails social media recently, and I really want to call her out for the great work she's done there. And we did want to kind of show you how some of those things are changing, which is why the change in the social media is a report for the board as well.
I think it's wonderful information. It just intrigued me that I'm like, okay, because it's so granular, like calling out different municipalities around Chicago. So like, okay, so we're not talking Chicagoland, or we, right? It just intriguing. I know that this is pretty messy data, and it's nice to have a picture of any kind, but interesting.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Indiana, like
Yeah,
Indiana.
that's true.
All right, I think next we have Brian with a presentation on the updated Rails website.
Hi, thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. I hope you've all had a chance to see the new site. It officially went live on March 13th. Since then we've been working through a punch list of items that still need to be done and fixing things that come to our attention on the way. One of our goals, is to make the site an expression of the Rails strategic plan. And I'm going to share my screen here. I'm using a PowerPoint because in my experience, doing a live website presentation while on Zoom tends to get very sluggish. So let's okay, are you seeing my PowerPoint now? It looks like it's up there.
Yes.
Excellent. So, and as you see, we do have, very prominently displayed on the homepage is our mission statement of We Connect Libraries. We've been working since last summer on the site with our contractor Atten Design Group, who's also our contractor and has been for several years on the L2 website project. So we've had a very good working relationship with them. One of the big things that we especially wanted to attend to in redesigning the Rails website were accessibility issues. And we do have our website built with the Drupal content management system, a website platform that's open source. It has quite a high degree of accessibility built into the software itself. And on top of that, when we put our RFP out for the design work on the site, our agreement with Atten Design Group requires them to deliver level AA compliance with accessibility standards, which is kind of like the standard level that government agencies and companies aspire to with their websites. For color contrast between text and background, we went with a stricter AAA compliance requirement because in our experience, the AA for the color contrast, it wasn't quite enough for, there's a lot of people like myself who are librarians whose vision is not all the greatest, and that AAA compliance for color contrast works a lot better. And fortunately, with Atten does have accessibility experts on their staff. And so one of their experts assigned to our project was reviewing all elements of the site's design as they're being done. Additional things that we have for accessibility is we're using the United States Web Design System on the site, and that's an implementation of standards that have been developed by the federal government for federal government websites. And a lot of that has some extra accessibility niceties built into that. So we're making use of that as well. We also considered accessibility in our design with our font choices. For the main content and basically all text except for the larger headings, we're using a font that's called Atkinson Hyperlegible, which was created by the Braille Institute to be especially readable. Every character has a distinct shape, so you may notice here that that the capital letter I, numeral 1, lowercase l, they all do look different. The capital letter B, numeral 8 have very distinct shapes. So that's another very good enhancement for people with visual impairments. And finally, on our content editors side of things, we use a plugin called Editoriali, which is Editoria with the shorthand A numeral 11Y for accessibility. And that's an accessibility checking tool that for content editors will see these little icons pop up that can indicate things that we would need to check for accessibility. For example, anytime there's an attached document, the plugin will advise us that yes, you should manually look at that document and check that document over for accessibility. If there are any real accessibility problems in the HTML markup on a web page, then there will be a very prominent red icon indicating those, and I think I've not seen one of those in quite a while in looking things over on the site, so that's a good thing. Something that's not directly connected with, accessibility of the website content, but kind of in a more general accessibility and EDI uh, manner, is that we made a change on the new website that for our library job listings, we now require all the job listings to state the pay rate or pay range explicitly in dollar figures. Most of the job listings were including dollar figure pay rates anyway, but now it's a requirement that any job listing does need to include that. So now on to doing a very brief tour of the website. In addition to tapping into our strategic planning process, the research that was done in 2011 for that, we also did get specific feedback from members for what they needed and how they used the Rails website. And the big thing that came out was restructuring the menus and simplifying the menu structure. So we have done that, and part of that we've included now a bar across the top of the page with direct links to our other support sites in L2. Getting to L2 from the Rails website was kind of a special sticking point with our old site. And also to reduce a number of items that we have in our menu structure. We also utilize a lot of prominent links to subordinate content and cross references to related content on many pages on the site. And we'll also see on here on the homepage, we have a very prominent subscription box for our weekly e-news. Our weekly e-news is definitely our most effective way of getting information to our members about what's happening at the system. Scrolling down the homepage a bit, we have some links for popular content that we at Rails can change as we see that our demands from members change. Also news from Rails, news from libraries. Below that, we have links to our library pulse pages on current issues for libraries. And the library pulse pages are also available through the services tab on the main menu bar. Whoop. And going back up to the top of the homepage, for a fullest experience on the Rails website, you do need to log into the site. And when you click through that link on top, you'll have a nice button here to log in with your L2 account. This is another new thing for the new site, is that we have much better coordination with L2 for our logins, that if you're already logged into L2 on the same device and same web browser, if you click that button, you automatically get logged into the Rails website without having to enter your email and password again. If you're not already logged into L2, you go to the L2 login page, log in there, and then it will kick you back to the Rails website logged in. As board members, you should all have an L2 account that uses an email address that's connected with your library. So you would use that to log in to L2 and the Rails website, and not your Rails board email address. So once you're logged in, you'll see that there is a list of web pages on the site that you've marked as favorites, if you've marked any as favorites on the site already. And the way to do that is on most of the web pages, there is a nice little link at the top of the page, add to favorites. You just need to click that. It'll end up in your favorites list. You can also get to your favorites list while you're logged in through your My Account user menu. So there's a link for My Favorites there. And also, as Rails board members, your My Account menu also includes a link to the Rails board portal. As I mentioned, one of the things that members really wanted out of the new site was much more simplified menu structure. And so the main menu, we have 3 tabs now: Services, Library Exchange, and About Rails. Under the Services tab is information about the specific things that Rails does for libraries. On the right-hand side there, you'll see that we have a set of links for Rails Member Center, a page for each Rails library type. And each of those pages includes a targeted summary of the Rails resources for that library type. In the Library Exchange menu tab, that's for member-to-member connections and communications that Rails facilitates. That's pretty much everything that's available where libraries can post things. And in the About Rails tab is where there's general information about Rails, including information about the board. Click on that Board of Directors link. Get to the main board page, which has information about board meetings, board members, also has a link to the board member portal. And you'll notice here that there's that See Also block in the right-hand sidebar. And that's an example of the kind of cross-referencing to related content that I had mentioned earlier. If you go to the Rails board portal page, that has information that's of special interest to you, our board members, including an FAQ for new board members, which may also be of use to folks who have been on the board for a while. Information about your board email accounts, forms that you need as board members, and various documents about duties and requirements for Rails board members. Looking this page over, if you have any suggestions for other information that would be useful for you to have, please let either me or Monica know about it, and we'll be happy to look and see what we can do for you. Because this is, we want the board portal to be information that you, as board members, will find will help you be more effective with your responsibilities. And that concludes my brief presentation here. I'm going to stop sharing and ask if anybody has any questions or comments.
Brian, this is Monica Caldecott on Zoom. First of all, I love the favorites. Thank you. That's very helpful. And I think I know will help me to get to what I need fast. One of the favorites I wanted to put was Jeanette's work on the school library data project. And I see that there's multiple ways I could have found it. But I guess just some feedback about how I did find it. So okay. I think I first found it at the bottom of the homepage, the Library Pulse under data analysis. And of course, I know I do a lot with my school website, so I'll get this, that I looked up and down this data analysis in libraries page. I can't tell you how many times. Never saw the big blue box at the top right, which had the school library data project. And I feel like maybe it should just be there twice. Like, could it be there twice? Could it be on the on the left-hand menu or the left-hand list of bullet points in addition to the big blue box, which I completely didn't see because I think my brain is just used to reading on the left side of a web page. So that's my one feature or my one feedback. And then I think once I got to the school library data page, I was expecting Jeanette's cool graphics. And there's a lot of things on this page, but to find it, it was like third line from the bottom to me was like the meat of that page. So I don't know if that click here to view our online project resource was the thing that I wanted. And it was like all nearly at the bottom of that page.
Okay, well that part I'll talk with Jeanette about because
okay.
She's the owner of that page,
Got
and
it.
I'm sure she'll be very happy to hear your suggestion. I know I love hearing suggestions, for example, with that you're having problems finding that because that gives me information that I need to fix things and make things better. That being said, one of my operating principles is that no matter what we do, it will be wrong. Because not everything's going to be right for everybody, but thank you very much for that suggestion, and I'll see what we can do about about working with that internal menu system there.
Yeah, well, I'll throw one more thing on there too, that under the services tab, the far right column, the member center geared for each type of library within Rails, that is just beautiful and really has been needed for a while. And I love the fact that as the board member representing school libraries, like, here is one URL I can share with my colleagues and say, if you feel like you don't know anything, this is the place to start. So rather than saying click here, then click here, then click here, it's wonderful that that the content for specific library types has been rolled together.
Thanks. Yeah, we're really happy to hear that. Oh, and Monica's on this meeting in Zoom, or Jeanette is on this meeting in Zoom too, and she says thanks, and she looks forward to restructuring the page to make resources more available. So, so excellent.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for that really thoughtful feedback, Monica. I know we really appreciate that, and I know Jeanette will be speaking to us a little later, and I'm sure she'll have more to share.
All right, thanks, Brian. Website looks great.
Thanks.
Up next, we have the State Library Report. Greg?
Good afternoon, everyone. Really just adding a bit more to what Monica already shared with you. I was prepared to, to address more things that we did discuss just yesterday with the State Library Advisory Committee group. An update on Senate Bill 2419, the License to Read Act, that did pass the Senate yesterday, or late yesterday, so it has moved on to the House now. So that is progress on that piece of legislation. Regarding the Secretary's budget, that does go to committee next week. Included in that, is stable funding for all library and literacy programs, which that's always good news to hear. And then, of course, the increase for the e-resources, which we did speak with the committee a lot about that, about what that really could mean for implementation in the state, and the need to move forward with some procurement processes for those. Regarding the Decennial Efficiency Act, the Secretary's staff is working through the county board associations and the county clerks to make certain, in addition, as they are notifying other governmental units impacted, that libraries are also receiving notification and reminders about this. Seems to be inconsistent. I know that one public library district that spans multiple counties has received a notification from one of the counties regarding this issue and expectations of what may need to be contained in the report from that county, because there doesn't seem to be any uniformity about that. So that hopefully will be going out soon, and then libraries would also be receiving notifications from the counties directly. So, and I think that's it for today.
Could I ask a question, Greg? Just
Sure.
regarding House Bill 4016, that is the Secretary's budget. Is there anything we can do to support that individually with legislators, or anything that would be useful?
I think certainly the Library Association will be monitoring that. I mean, that's typically not something, let me get back to you on that, Monica.
Okay, thank you, Greg. I appreciate
Sure.
that.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Any questions for Greg before we move on? All right, we're on to new business, starting with the ethics ordinance. Monica?
Thank you. So what you're seeing here today, ethics ordinance, is part of an effort that is being undertaken by the policy committee, who is going back through all of the policies that we have here at Rails and looking at them and making sure that they have been regularly reviewed, and in some cases being updated and brought to the board. So what you'll see here in terms of the Ethics Act ordinance is a policy that was, and I know it says that it was last approved on July 1st, 2011, some of the footer language that was there, but there was an additional piece that was in June 17, 2016. So that's actually the last time that this particular policy has been approved by the board, and the policy that you have here in place is the one that was approved in 2016. What this notes, of course, are all of our legal obligations for ethics and the Ethics Act that you also heard about and received during the board orientation back in July. We just wanted the opportunity for the board to review this and look through it. If you have any comments or questions, it's a great time to ask them. Once the board has reviewed, we will add essentially a footer that says that the board reviewed it on the date of this meeting, so that going forward, we'll see that the board's reviewed as of March. We are also looking at 2 additional policies currently in policy committee. One is around our financial fiscal accountability. And so we are making several updates to that policy moving forward. And we're also looking at our social media policy. Once those have been through, we'll look at additional policies. And our hope is to look at the personnel manual in fiscal year 2024. Anything our policy committee would like to add to this process?
No, I think you've covered it well.
Okay, thank
A
you,
lot of
Jennifer.
fun.
The best committee, guys, really. All the fun in policy.
As a policy. It's important, though.
It is.
It's very
Absolutely.
important, yeah. Any other comments or questions about the Ethics Act ordinance before we move on?
All right. If not, then next we have the Rails board member job description update. Monica?
Okay. This comes both from the work that we did at the policy committee level around talking about board diversity and defining what the board means by board diversity. And then, of course, you all remember in our January meeting, we took a survey and then also looked at how the board is defining board diversity. And so we wanted the opportunity to be able to add some of these expectations of the board to the board job description, which you saw attached in your packet. There are 2 changes that are in this for your to look at and potentially approve. So one is a additional diversity statement for Rails board candidates that reflects the discussion that was had by this board. And then the second is to just update in keeping with the ending of the emergency proclamation in May, just to make the expectation known to potential board members that they would need to be able to appear in person or within the realm of what the Open Meetings Act will accept for board members. So any questions about these changes to the board member job description? If approved by the board today, then this job description will replace the current job description, and that link to the new job description will also be reflected in the call for nominations that's going out to the board.
I have a question.
Yes.
Would the, see how I can put it. The board, not the board meetings, but the different committees, the committee meetings. Would this also apply to committee meetings if you wanted to be on Zoom and then you put it in your library as a, 48-hour notice or whatever, you would be able to do that also?
It does. So the Open Meetings Act requirements do apply to both our regular board meetings as
And
well as the
committee.
board committees.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Monica, I put the exact grammar change in the chat, but I do recommend one grammar change in the diversity statement. I believe it should read, the Rails board seeks candidates who reflect the diversity. Sorry, the newspaper copy editor and me can't ever quit.
So the who as opposed to the that, right, Monica?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that change.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions or feedback about the proposed update to the board member job description? If not, may I have a motion and a second to approve the amended Rails board member job description?
So moved, Julie.
Julie, thank you.
Second, Alice.
Alice, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next, we have the amendment to the fiscal year 2023 budget.
So I'm going to introduce that and then I'll pass it over to Sharon for additional discussion. So as we mentioned last month, so based on the changes that the board approved as a result of our discussion and the agreement that was made between Rails and the International Brotherhood of the Teamsters Local 325, we wanted to make a budget adjustment to reflect those changes here. And so you should see them all listed in your budget amendment. And then once if the board chooses to approve this budget amendment, this will then be submitted to the Illinois State Library. Sharon, what would you like to add about this process and your development?
Oh, and just to list out, I wanted to note something on here. So this covers the collective bargaining terms for that group of affected drivers. This also covers the increase in the hourly wage for all of the rest of the delivery drivers. $19.50 per hour. And it also covers bringing the any delivery service managers who are below the midpoint of their range up to the midpoint of their range. And this budget amendment is based on current work schedule. So you will see one line that did decrease a little bit because one person did go down a little bit in their work schedule due to the adjustments that I made.
Any questions for Sharon or for myself about this process?
Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion and a second for approval of the amendment to the fiscal year 2023 budget?
This is Becky. I move that.
Becky, thank you.
Karen, second.
Karen, thank you. And since this is a financial approval, we will need a roll call for this. Stacy?
Rosie Camargo. Alice Creason,
Yes.
Robin Hellenthal,
Yes.
Diane Hollister,
Yes.
Renee Leva,
Yes.
Jennifer McIntosh,
Yes.
Julie Millivick,
Yes.
Becky Stratford,
Yes.
Thomas Stagg,
Yes.
Beth Teppen,
Yes.
Alex Vancino,
Yes.
Vanessa Villarreal,
Yes.
Karen Wojtek,
Yes.
and Monica Caldecott.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next, we have unfinished business, beginning with the board election and nominating committee. The nominating committee is chaired by Alice Creason this year. Also on the committee are board member Renee Leva, Alexis Kraskadden, director of the National Louis University Library, Jennifer Lucas, Barrington Public Library District trustee, and Laura Turner, former Rails board member from Caterpillar Incorporated. The committee reviewed the Rails board member job description, discussed recruitment techniques, and made some changes to the nomination form. There are 5 seats up for election this year. 3 trustee seats currently held by myself, Becky Stratford, and Beth Teppen. The school seat held by Monica Caldecott, and the academic seat held by Jennifer McIntosh. Since Juanita Harrell resigned last month, her specialized library seat is open, and whoever is elected to that seat will carry out her term through June 2025. All other terms for this election are from July 2023 through June 2026. Any questions or discussion about the election process? Alice, anything to add?
We had a good kickoff meeting earlier this week, so we look forward to the process.
Thank you. Okay, next we have our board development topic, and Jeanette Durecki will be presenting on the school library data project.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. I'm going to share my screen really quick. I have some slides to share with you today. There you go. Hopefully you can see my screen. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to share an update on the project. It's been a little while since I've been with this group, so I'm excited to share with you what we've been doing over the past year. A lot has happened since I've been here. So I'd like to start just by noting some general information and observations we've made after a year of work. Some of these might seem fairly obvious, but I want to look at things at a kind of a fundamental level before I dig into a little bit greater detail. On the right-hand side of the screen or this slide, you'll see the list of the sources for our data. This data collection is ongoing. Right now, we're in the midst of annual certification, actually nearing the end, and that's a major source of data for this project. First, we know there are still issues with reporting data about school libraries in Illinois. The NCES data shows only 59% of districts have library and media staff, and some of those districts where no reported staff are indicated, we know there are library workers. So this is an area where we continue to work on, and where through our partnership with ISLE, we've established some contacts at the Illinois State Board of Education that can hopefully help with this issue. We also remain connected with Keith Curry-Lance from the SLIDE project and have discussed how crucial the resolution of this issue is in terms of sustainability for our project and for the data going forward. Next, it's probably no surprise that not all schools have libraries. Schools are still electing to convert their library spaces into alternate learning areas like STEM labs, or they simply eliminate them altogether. In a recent survey, at least 40 administrators reported that they don't have a library, and the data only represents a fraction of schools statewide. Already this year's certification shows hundreds of schools and member districts where this is an issue. Also, not all libraries are staffed. There's a lot of really clever, creative ways that districts are staffing school libraries. Those range from full-time dedicated school librarians to support staff coming in flexibly as needed. This is confirmed by the data that we have coming in, where we are seeing the full-time equivalent staff counts are less than the number of buildings in some districts. We're also seeing an alarming trend of librarians retiring that are simply not being replaced. And finally, not all school libraries are available when staff aren't present. Through conversations with school library workers, many have shared that their library is just completely closed when they're not there, meaning students lose access to all of those resources. Throughout the project, we've been focusing on the three main areas that you see here. Next, I'd like to briefly share some findings about each area. First up is library staff. The information you see here is from last year, so the fiscal year 22 certification data. It's excluding this year, but I will mention briefly some of the areas that we have where we're already seeing some different changes. We had staff data representing 563 school agencies. That's 493 public school districts and 70 private schools. That's roughly 58% of public school districts in Illinois. And our data represents 1,468 schools. The data that we're seeing this year has a little way to go to reach these totals, but based on the number of schools left to certify, hopefully we will get there. Right now, I think just over 700 agencies have completed certification. Last year's data identified 2,882 school library workers, which corresponded to about 2,500 full-time equivalent library positions. That nearly 83% of those workers were from Rails member libraries, 17% were from Illinois Heartland Library System members. This year's incoming data so far shows about 2,134 positions, equating to 1,850 full-time library employees. And library staff members across the state are identified by more than 300 unique titles, and we're on track to meet that same number with the data that's coming in. So next, I want to talk about staffing in education. The data we have shows about a third of library workers have some formal degree in library and information science. 21% of all workers have an MLIS. 1 out of every 3 school library workers has a library information specialist endorsement, which is the standard for certification in Illinois. According to the Illinois State Board of Education, there are 1,402 educators that hold that endorsement and that are actively working. So whether they're working as librarians or not, we have yet to determine, but they have active licenses and are working in schools. So those staff members that do have a degree in library and information science are more likely to also earn their endorsement, and certified library educators are more likely to be employed full-time. The number of certified staff members that district employs may vary by district size and their location. We've noticed a very, very slight positive correlation between the number of schools in a district and the number of full-time equivalent library staff that they have. When you're considering district size based on enrollment, in small districts, about 25% of library staff are certified. In medium-sized districts, that goes up to 33%. And then for larger districts, it increases to 66%, or about 2/3 of their library staff. And for schools in various types of locations, we found that districts located in cities are least likely to have certified staff. Of the districts for which we have data, 5% of districts in cities indicate that they have a certified library staff member. And that's compared to 27% of districts in suburbs, 23% of districts in towns, and then 26% of districts in rural locations. The position of district librarian I want to mention because it's becoming more common. However, the roles and the responsibilities associated with it vary greatly. For example, some districts, this is the sole certified librarian and serves as a member of their central office staff, while in other districts, this librarian might oversee the work of all buildings, but also manage one or more locations themselves. The fall survey we conducted showed about 20% of school librarians work in or oversee more than one location, and the most locations reported by any one person was 12. So this is an area that we're watching pretty closely because we want to determine the impact of these roles to help us inform advocacy about their continued adoption. We're seeing an increase in these still going on. I think in the Iowa listserv this week, I saw 2 more people mention that their districts are shifting to this model. So next, I want to talk about library finances. We have finance data for 484 schools and or districts with reported budgets ranging from 0 to just over $4 million. The median budget reported was about $3,000. But you'll see for this year, this range is considerably smaller. Of the districts who've submitted budget data so far, the largest budget reported is just over $400,000 by Chicago Public Schools, which is indicated with the red line on the graph. And the smallest budget, was $400 reported by Salt Fork School District in Vermilion County. So that's just the funding that's available, that's provided by the district itself. Additionally, we're studying the outside funding sources, and one main source of those is the Illinois State Libraries School District Grant, also known as the per capita grants. And grant awards for this year haven't been announced yet, so that information should be coming out soon. So we'll talk about last year. And last year, 672 districts, that's 79% of school districts, received the grant. 327 districts, roughly half of the districts, received the minimum grant award of $850. 141 of those districts were from Illinois Heartland Library System. 186 were Rails members. There's a higher percentage of school library members in IHLS that received the minimum grant award compared to in Rails. The minimum grant award, just to give you an idea, is equivalent to a district enrollment of about 960 students. So you understand like how large your district would have to be to earn more than that amount. We're also looking at the Illinois State Board of Education's evidence-based funding formula, which provides recommendations for staffing core personnel, which includes librarians and library aides. While this probably relates more to staffing than budgets, I want to mention it here because this is something that we're looking into heavily because it speaks to how well districts can fund their programs overall. For those of you who are not familiar with this formula, ISBE classifies districts into 4 different tiers based on their ability to self-fund essential programs and personnel. 624 districts fall into tier 1 or tier 2. That's the 73% that you see here. These 2 tiers rely most heavily on funding from the state to provide their core staff. So the 73% is a little bit discouraging, but something that is very encouraging is that about 20% of districts already fall in tier 4, which means they can basically fund the entire formula already. So that's the one bright shining spot. I guess we have a little bit of work to do to get everybody else there. So our project has found no real correlation between a district's full-time equivalent library staff and their percent capacity to meet evidence-based funding expectations. But there is a slight positive correlation between a district's total library budget and their percent capacity to meet those expectations. So that means that libraries in districts where financial resources are less of an issue and more available tend to have slightly larger library budgets. Moving on to collections. This is an area where we have the least consistent data and one that poses a lot of challenges. Schools are still working to overcome some of the issues from the pandemic, including loss of materials, inability to conduct physical counts. In fact, we're learning that about 20% of districts report that they don't conduct a full physical inventory annually. 659 districts reported collection data last year, and that's primarily what we're analyzing. Additionally, we know that 400 schools and districts statewide belong to some library consortium. Print materials were reported as the most prevalent type purchased for school collections, and ebooks came in second. And librarians are reporting a continued increase in demand for digital resources of all types to keep up with changes in curriculum and learning objectives. This is not always easy due to limitations on spending. And then there's a few extra things I'd like to talk about just that are noted at the bottom. Some school libraries report that they don't have automated collection management systems, although we don't know exactly how many. This can make it difficult for them to measure and identify needs and keep their collections current. School libraries are increasingly relying on resource sharing partnerships and subscription services to meet students' needs. At least one district reports they spend 65 to 70% of their budget on these items. And this year we've asked schools to indicate the services they're subscribing to as part of certification. And so far, more than 300 members have included this information for us. So I'm looking forward to seeing, how that breaks down. The types of digital resources or subscriptions and member services vary greatly by school population. Librarians have shared approaches analyzing cost per search or cost per login, as well as other ways of evaluating the resources that they're choosing. And they also look at things like the number of curriculum objectives that are met. They inform us that students routinely do not have access to databases and resources they need to conduct research and learn information literacy skills. And they also hear from librarians at higher levels of education about a lack of student preparedness regarding some of those skills. So they're fighting to make sure that they have funding for the resources they need to provide them. Finally, just a quick look at what's next for this project. First, we're looking to rebrand it a little bit, which includes a new name and logo. While School Library Data Project is really clear, it doesn't really reflect the long-term ongoing aspect of this project or its status as an advocacy resource. A big part of that is also going to be the school library database that we're building. The data tables are being updated for this database, and then the dashboard development team. I've been working with a team of 21 school librarians statewide who are providing insight and guidance into developing an online data tool. They've been really helpful so far in creating a list of features and functions, as well as thinking through the best method to present a lot of the sensitive data like budgets and other items. We're continuing to gather data to reach a complete baseline set. We're not quite there yet. In addition to the three main areas that I talked about today, we're also examining data by county and regional office of education, including public library service and how that correlates to served versus unserved populations. We're continuing to analyze how our data correlates with student outcome data and information needs. We're exploring the role of the district librarian, as I mentioned before, and what that means for educators working to serve districts in that capacity. And then we're also looking at to what degree certified teachers are working as library support staff. We've found that there are a lot of teachers who are working either full-time or part-time in these roles, and how we provide support to them might vary from people who don't have an educational background. Last but certainly not least, we continue to advocate for school libraries and school library workers. This takes place in part through our monthly partnership meetings with IL, Illinois Heartland, ILA, and the State Library, as well as through workshops and presentations. We're hoping to participate in some presentations at both the Illinois Library Association and the IL annual conferences this fall. We're continuing to explore methods to increase awareness and educate school administrators and school board members about the importance of school libraries. Just very recently, we partnered with the Illinois Heartland Library Association to acquire an administrators academy developed by Ruth Shastine and Georgianne Birch that is about facilitating student learning through the school library. And Joe Philippek and his team are working on the logistics of putting that program into practice. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. I want to thank you again for your time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
This is Renee. I just had a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
By any chance, and I don't think you probably have this in your data, but how many of these school libraries who do not have a physical library or the budget have a public library within their district?
So I can't give you that right offhand. A lot of them do. I would say the majority of them do, probably at least 70%. I can say that fairly confidently. I'm not sure of the exact number, but I'll be happy to look into that for you.
And I'm adding to this. The only reason is because my district, I have two schools that do not have a physical library. They don't have a library budget at all. So one of the concepts that I've been working on, I just can't do it this fiscal year or this fiscal year, is adding book lockers within their schools to be able to then use our consortium to provide our public service within the schools And we would just budget it so that we can provide the lockers, which usually they cost about $10,000. But I think it's like those type of ideas, it's out of the box, that I think some of these schools will have to reach out to their public libraries. Because most of these public libraries, depending on their budget, they should be able to afford $10,000 within, and then especially they have financing. So if they could afford $2,500 per year to be able to help, like for example, for me, it's a high school of like 400 kids. So just to be able to increase that exposure of the public library to the students, and especially with me, the schools are 25 minutes away from the library. So blue collar families, they're not going to travel to my library when they're tired. And those kids don't have the ability to actually drive to the library, especially they're going to drive the highway to get to the library. So I think one, Rail should at least at one point help with grant funding in regards to school libraries who do not have it, to get this out of the box type of thing, to get some assistance from these public libraries, because technically they're in district with that public library and there are members of that library. So they should at least get some type of assistance from them. I'm like, schools have, unfortunately, some schools move those monies somewhere else, but there are schools that just do not have enough funding, and those are my schools. So it's one of those things where I'm trying to think of other ideas. I just hope that instead of just, hopefully this data, like the question that I asked, will then show these public schools that, hey, some of that money that you're probably investing in programming, if you're able to help these schools to actually have a physical presence, they can check out a book at their school, that would be great. But if you can find that data, that'd be amazing, because I think even Monica would probably use that.
Yeah, I think that that's a really important point. Like, there's a couple of different things that we're exploring, both for Rails members as well as the Illinois Heartland Library System. I've been working with Leah Gregory, who's their school liaison, quite a bit at examining this, because something that's really come out in a lot of the data we've collected is the number of not just intergovernmental agreements between public libraries and school libraries to provide some kind of service or assistance, but the number of school libraries that are being actually staffed by public librarians. So and we've found a couple of different people who are employed part-time by the public library and part-time by the school district. So it's truly a shared resource. So we're trying to determine exactly how many of those exist, where are they, how are they existing? Like, what's the model that they're using for creating that arrangement? And is it successful? You know, do they go into the school to provide service? Do the kids have to come to the public library? What's the proximity? So we're looking at a lot of that. Part of the challenge with some of this is in schools where there's no librarian or no library, those are members that it's much harder for, I guess should just say schools, where it's much harder for us to get that information, right? So it's going to the public libraries in that case to understand, you know, how they're serving. The other thing I've heard from the public library side with a couple of those librarians I've spoken with is that there are many times, you know, everything in Illinois is districted in kind of this crazy way, right? So it's nothing aligns very nicely. Like, there was one public librarian who expressed a little bit of a frustration, I would say, because they're very limited in how they can serve the school that they actually serve, because all the students don't fall in their tax district. So she's like, we have to be very careful from a, you know, fiduciary responsibility point of view that we're just serving the people who are technically our members. So it's figuring out how to navigate those types of situations, and maybe public libraries need to come together to serve that school and figure out how they're going to share that responsibility, or what's the school's responsibility or their role in that. So I think it's going to be a very crucial thing to determine, and I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, I think the important thing is the intergovernmental agreements with other libraries, but then also trying to figure out, like you said, what are alternatives to serve those kids, because it's not their fault. It's all money at the end of the day, but it is coming back from taxpayers that, you know, it's the same tax body. But all right, thank you.
And yeah, and I think with schools, you know, we hear time and time again, oh, if you can't get something at school, you can get it at the public library. Well, but what if you really can't? You know, like, so what do those kids do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is Monica. Renee, thank you so much for sharing what your public library is doing and that you're aware of what's going on in the schools in your I applaud you for that and hope all that goes well for you. I think there's too many examples of, well, I'm going to say my example is going to be kind of a positive one, but it's sort of frustrating too. So the elementary district, that feeds into my high school, they own land directly next to the public library. And so they built a brand new kindergarten center literally next door to the public library. And I'm going to say on purpose, they have no library and no librarian in this kindergarten center because the library is right next door. So God love the public library, Cook Memorial Public Library, yay. They stepped up and now they have a full-time school librarian who works for the public library who serves the kindergartners. And you know, that wasn't there. To me, that frustrates me because that school district abdicated their responsibility to provide the library space and the library staff, but they didn't. And so I so appreciate when public libraries understand that whether by choice or by inability, a school cannot provide that maybe the public library could step up. So yeah, those examples I think show the good that can come out of it, even if sometimes the decisions make you angry on the front end, right? Let's not hold the kids who can't drive 25 minutes on a highway to the library, or the kindergartners who have no library and so they're going to walk next door. I want to add a little bit more for Jeanette. Thank you so much for using such awesome words as creative and clever when describing crazy instances of like makes you want to rip your hair out about decisions and status of school libraries. Thank you so much for gathering data and being able to share it in such a smooth way that makes it easy to understand what we're seeing. I think this advocacy piece will get me choked up, but it just is so great to think that people see us and the people who are struggling the most, you know, those district librarians with 12 buildings. Oh my God, like people see that situation. And I think the more that we can see it and to stand up for our fellow school librarians, you know, data is the way that we're going to be able to show. I so appreciate Rails, you know, jumping on a statement about school library programs staffed by licensed school librarians. Like all of this is it warms my heart and I appreciate it.
Thank you for those kind
Monica.
words. I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is
And I just want to
Rosie.
say,
I was-
Monica, Oh, hi, Rosie. Sorry about that.
Hi.
Go ahead and talk.
I just had a question for Jeanette about the data. Like, for instance, my daughter goes to Chicago Public Schools, and my sister is the librarian at the school. She has an LTA, but the way the school used to do it is that it falls under the paid volunteer. And it used to be like a parent or someone who would come and fix it. But thankfully, when I got in as the LSC president, I was like, my sister has an LTA. She's actually been trained. And so that's how they've incorporated, and the library changed completely. And they saw that change because it's someone that was trained that came in and repurposed, you know, refixed the library as a library. So how did you, I don't know, I guess ask, like, do you have someone in library, but you allocated it somewhere else? Because this paid volunteer is like a different budget line for the school because they couldn't afford a librarian, but she has her LTA. She just falls under this title.
So she would still count as their library staff, and they have still reported those people to us. So that I did ask them for that. Like the first round of staffing that we got from Chicago Public Schools, let me just preface by saying they're not included in last year's staff data very much at all, because we had nothing from them aside from what we already had on file in our own records for Rails. They didn't submit any staff data for the 2022 certification, but they have submitted it this year. And like, I know a lot of this is part of the struggle with this is we get a lot of districts who want to send us just their certified staff members, or I want to send you just my librarians, and I'll come back to them and ask for, I need to know everybody who's in your library, like whether they're there one morning a week and it's a parapro, like I want to know who's in the library, who's providing a service to those students, because that also, I mean, it speaks to a lot of things, right? Like how we can support them with professional development or training, you know, the events that Rails is planning and working with other organizations to provide so that we know that those people have the skills they need to do the jobs they're hired for. But also just, you know, it tells me if your resources are available to your students on a full-time basis, or is your library closed? Is there somebody there? Is there someone not? So I want to know all of those things. They did very graciously provide a full list of their staff. So we do have them, even if they're not called a librarian, and they did provide us the background. So even the non-certified staff has been reported. Someone with an LTA certainly is classified for our study as someone who has formal training in library and information science. So whether you were a licensed educator or a certified librarian or not, you still are counted among those numbers. And we still know that those people have that training. Does that help, Rosie?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
CPS, I will say, is a really interesting kind of animal, right? Because it's so many buildings, and we know that they only have a very small percentage of buildings that have librarians. So I've been working with, you know, a couple of the different staff members there to talk with them about, you know, kind of what's happening, because they're, you know, whether or not to have a librarian in a school is made at the building level there. That's where the decision is made. So it's kind of interesting. And I've had a number of their administrators, their principals kind of contact me when I did that survey in the fall, because they were the ones receiving the survey link. And they said, you know, I don't have one this year, but I hope to have one next year. They're trying to get those because they also recognize that that's an important piece of the learning equation.
I just want to say a few words. I want to say thank you, Jeanette, for the presentation, first of all, because I think it is so clear where some of the things that we're learning are coming from and how important this information is, and really appreciate your diligence. I also want to thank you, Monica, for being such a passionate advocate for school libraries and continuing to let us know about all of the ways in which school libraries need support. We've learned so much from you, and also from our partnership that we have with ISLE that includes the Illinois Library Association, Heartland, the Illinois State Library, representatives from Chicago Public Schools. We are now looking at adding somebody from ISBE to that group, which would be huge if we can get some connection with somebody there, and potentially adding staff from Carly as well to talk about that connection. And this work continues on because we know how important it is. And so we really appreciate the opportunity for you to share what you've learned, but so much of what we've been able to come up with has come because of that partnership that has been created with these other organizations who continue to tell us what is valuable for us to share as they're working on doing their own advocacy as well.
All right, any other questions for Jeanette? All right, thank you, Jeanette. Next, let's see. We are on to Rails board member reports. Does anyone have any news from their library that they would like to share?
I do.
Brandon?
The Shore Troy Library has reopened and the remodeling is done and it looks wonderful. Everybody's very happy there. And it just looks great. We had this guy come, that David Vinjamuri, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right.
Yeah.
And he, you know, he gave us what we should do. And there was only so much we could do, because a lot of it was like, move the stacks over this way, you know, we couldn't lift them up. So since we put in carpet, they did that part and they moved it. And oh my word, it's like a whole new library. And really it was just paint and carpet, you know, so it looks nice. We're having our official opening. I mean, it's open as of this Monday, but our official opening is on the 30th, March 30th at 5:30. We're gonna have giant scissors Like
I
my favorite
love,
part.
we did that once.
Yeah.
That was super fun.
Giant scissors, and
fun.
I was, that won me over. So anyway, giant scissors, anybody wants to see them.
What was the date?
March 30th
March 3rd.
at 5:30, yeah. You know, my, the library director has invited a bunch of politicians and, you know, the newspaper, Patch and all that stuff. So I don't know who's coming, but it's a proud moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
I also have something, Lake Villa, Lake Villa District Library, we now have an after-school bus from the high school dropping off students at the library. So it's really nice. I've been hearing really good feedback from staff about it. They said it's very busy, but it's really nice to have that, especially because it's right off of a busy road, Grant Avenue in our area. So I think it's gonna be really, really good for them. It looks so far so good. Oh, and then we did have our outdoor meeting space, meeting for our patrons yesterday regarding what next steps we're going to do next. So right now we're working on the budget and what we're going to start working on and everything. So it's been a long process, but we're really excited to keep pushing that. It's good.
Great.
No.
I'll share some news. That's not my news to share, but I know because she was a friend of ours, I'll share it around. Our former board member, Hallie Cox, just announced her engagement on Facebook. So yay for her. So
Congratulations to Hallie.
yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I don't know if you guys all remember. So Hallie and I were friends from high school. We used to be friends. I've been friends with her forever, and how fun that both of us are in new married life later in life. So as I tell my students at school, even old people fall in love.
I just wanted to put a plug in. If anybody knows a teen services librarian, we have an opening for a teen services coordinator. So that is just getting posted right now. So anybody wants to come over to Downers Grove to do teen services, it's a great team to join. It's a great team.
I've got one. Next month, it's actually the day of our next board meeting on the 28th, is the 21st Annual Information Literacy Summit. It's going to be hosted in person again. It's been a couple of years virtual now, and it's now hosted at College of DuPage. It's done in collaboration with DePaul University Libraries as well. Since we can't be there, it'd be helpful if you have other staff that are interested in attending. It's focuses on information literacy, but the audience is meant to be broad. It's not meant to be just academic libraries, school libraries, public librarians. And to really underscore that, this year, the theme is Stronger Together, interdisciplinary perspectives on media and information literacy. And the keynote is actually a panel presentation of academic, school, public librarians that all have viewpoints on the idea of information and media literacy. So really trying to underscore and build more of an audience at the event that is, drawing on a broader library type. So I'm really excited to kind of see how that model works and to welcome all these people onto campus. So very exciting to see. And infolitsummit.org is the website for the event.
Hi, Freddie. With April coming around, I make it a point to always celebrate Day of the Child, Dia del Niño. And so I hope other libraries are doing it. It's a cultural celebration of our children. And we're doing at South Holland a whole month of it. So I have every week a different event, bilingual events for our families. So I'm really excited. I'm having 2 concerts, one at Niles and one at South Holland. And also, so I'm part of the Reforma task force. We are creating a Reforma chapter, our Midwest chapter, collecting it, I guess. We kind of lost it. So we're going to start it again. And I'm the social media person. So our Facebook page will officially go live on Monday. So if you have any librarians or libraries that have Spanish speaking communities, let them know that pretty soon we'll have our Midwest chapter and they can start accessing information on our Reforma Midwest Facebook page. Thanks.
Rosie, can you share the date of Dia de los Niños?
Yes, it is April 30th.
April 30th.
So there's still time. You can still do something. I have a whole blog about it, so I can share it. There's lots of stuff you can do. Usually, Day of the Child, Day of the Book, children receive a book, but it's more like I try and focus on the child, and they appreciate who they are and what they do, and that they matter.
Well, at the Helen Plum Library, we are getting closer to our grand opening in April. We closed on March 9th for moving. So spent a couple days packing the collection, and all the contents of staff offices have been moved. We're just waiting on our occupancy permit from the village before we can officially move in. Couple little hiccups there, but nothing that's going to hold up the opening. We're still on track for the weekend of April 22nd and 23rd.
Do you have big scissors?
I don't know. There might be some big scissors.
Get them, they're really fun. Like, I can't,
You could borrow ours. We'll be done with them by then.
I'm sure we got ours from the Business Association.
Yes, I know the Chamber of Commerce will be there at some point, and I've seen them at other events with the scissors. So.
We did the Sean Ford do the scissors when we did something.
And then also at the New Lenox Library, we were just finishing up our major renovation on the first floor. We've taken about 1,000 square feet of poorly utilized staff space and opened that back up to the public. Expanded our makerspace and digital media lab, and the buildings was kind of in need of a bit of a facelift. So we replaced carpet and added some new furniture. It's a much nicer and more welcoming space than it used to be. So we are hoping to have our grand opening for that on Saturday, April 29th. I don't think we have finalized the times yet, but it'll be that morning. And the chamber will be there. I'll ask about the scissors.
If you need them, you just let me know.
Thank you.
I'll drive with them on the hood of my car.
Oh, gosh.
Dangerous.
All right. If there are no other reports, then we have our meeting recap and agenda building for the next Rails board meeting. Our next meeting will be on Friday, April 28th, 1 p.m. and we will be traveling to Coal Valley. The Rails board and staff will be dining together on Thursday, April 27th. And we'll be taking a tour of the Rock Island Watts Midtown branch at 10:30 a.m. Lunch will be served the day of the board meeting at noon at the Coal Valley Service Center. Please make sure you let Emily know if you plan on attending either the day before or the day of the board meeting.
Should we let her know or should we wait till she asks?
Monica, do you know?
You know what? I'll. There's a lot of little pieces to this,
Right,
so
that's what I
just
think.
I'll see if Emily can send out a message just
That'd
asking
be better,
people at
'cause I don't
which
want to like
marks they're
send her
doing.
an answer and
Absolutely.
receive it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We'll do
Okay.
that.
Make sure all of her lists are ready. so
I mean,
that
it's a lot, it's a
checking
lot of
everybody
things to
off.
do.
I know. With people probably doing varying parts of it. So
Yes,
yeah,
so I want to make
absolutely.
sure we don't add to her work.
And while I can, let me make clear that while we would love to see everyone in Coal Valley, the Burridge Service Center will still be open for anybody wishing to attend the board meeting from Burridge. That is absolutely an option for you. So just want to make that clear.
What, one more time on the tour, because I have to come that day, so.
Let's see.
10:30.
We're 10:30.
10:30, let me see how early I wake up.
Also, if you've not done so yet, please let Emily know today by email if you are interested in attending the ALA conference.
We're gonna have a booth. I don't remember if we talked about that. Okay.
All right. Is there anything else before we adjourn?
Yeah, Alex, can I just ask one more question about Coal Valley? You know, my husband is so up for a road trip. So I'm thinking about trying to make it out there in person. Can you just, so I did get a little bit, some of the details. It's, would Emily also be able to share lodging suggestions or things like that if we had to come out the night before?
Yes, we will book any lodging that anyone needs in order to come out, we will book as part of this process. So that part you don't have to worry about. And for anybody who's driving directly there, we will also share, the address so you can put it into your GPS and get
It's
there.
on the Rails
exactly.
website.
And it's also on the Rails website. That's true. But we will also make it easy for you guys. Does that answer your question, Monica?
Yes, thank you. So the lodging being offered is for Thursday so that we're there all day Friday. Okay, got it.
Yes, but if you are interested in staying on Friday and just wanting to know where we were and because you're looking for suggestions, happy to share that info.
Okay.
Too. Absolutely.
All right, anything else? If not, this meeting is adjourned at 2:38 p.m. Thank you all.